To our next flipped video. We're going to be here talking about the Mongols. So go ahead and title these here. Who were the Mongols and how did they create such a vast empire? So as we've discussed, the Mongols began as pastoral nomads. That's a term I want you to put on the left-hand side of your notes. Pastoral nomads are people who raise animals and then they move based upon seasonal changes. Nomads means that they don't have a set home. Pastoral refers to raising animals. So then the Mongols, unlike some of the other empires we've already studied, began first as nomadic people and really continued as such until we have a shift in the leadership, which we'll get to. The Mongols lived in those movable in what are known as yurts, which are movable homes, a reflection, of course, of the fact that they are hunter gatherers and moving in this nomadic lifestyle. And that yurt is a common, you still find that in modern day Mongolia and other areas in kind of northeastern and central Asia, which is a reflection of the fact that they were once conquered by the Mongols. The Mongols had an absolutely incredible empire in size, and I want to quickly just remind you of this by showing you this map here, beginning in 1206. And you can see wrong way, just the unbelievable growth of the empire it was just in a matter of years here. And you can see that all across Central Asia, getting into the Middle East, up until Europe, and then by 1294 we see the split of the empire into several different regions known as khanates, and that's another thing we're going to come back to. So just to get ourselves oriented with the sheer size of the Mongol Empire. Politically, the Mongol leadership was high. Actually, I'm going to go first here. Oops, sorry, I'm all over the map. I'm going to give you this just in case we didn't get to it in class. Okay. The Mongol Empire began with a man named Chinggis, also known as Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was known for being incredibly ruthless. Ruthless is just savage, I guess, in some ways. Completely using incredibly brutal tactics at war. Yet he was an incredibly effective leader. He turned this group of nomadic peoples into the leaders of one of the largest and at the time most successful empires in all of Western history, Eastern history, excuse me. He began building his empire around 1200, and as it says here, he transformed those nomadic people into just ruthless warriors. So how did he do it? The first thing came down to some of the technology he used. Right? One of the things he did is he ensured that his people were masters of cavalry. Cavalry are soldiers who are on horseback. So go ahead and put on the left-hand side creation of such an empire. On the right, we'll put cavalry with it. And if you don't know the definition of the word cavalry, add that to the left-hand side. The Mongols created very superior bows, so their bow and arrows were extremely targeted and extremely effective. So the combination of cavalry plus the effective bows meant that they were extremely strong warriors, and especially in relation to people who did not have the cavalry or the weaponry. They had very rigid military organization. There was high expectations of the soldiers. There were brutal punishments for soldiers who abandoned, but they had a very hierarchical and organized military that would cover a vast amount of ground. They also had a reputation for total warfare. That means complete and total destruction. So when the Mongols came to town, they would often completely and utterly destroy the towns that they were seeking to find. And typically that happened when the towns resisted the Mongols. So we saw that over a period of time, many towns simply gave up just even before the Mongols themselves arrived, just out of fear and out of these stories of the brutal Mongol conquest. Once conquered, the Mongol leadership was hierarchical, so there's the same similar hierarchy we've seen in other civilizations. And there was a single Khan, or leader, at the top, who was then supported by very powerful families. One of the things that the Mongols did that was so effective, the word politically, by the way, should be on the left-hand side, is that they would incorporate very loyal subjects into the military themselves. So the people that they would conquer, they would absorb those groups of people and put them into positions of local leadership, which means that they are still remaining in power, but they're now going to answer to the Khan that's conquered them. And they also used those very same people in the military. So you can see that it would really bind people to the leadership of the Khan and leadership of the Mongols themselves. The Jagesh is the unified legal code, so that all across the Mongol Empire, everyone was following the same laws. You can see that would surely help build the strength of the empire as a whole. So you can see again, here's the conquest of the Mongols, and you can see under Genghis Khan, and then the later successors are the ones who got up into the northern areas there. So the Mongols, they were this massive territory, that on the left-hand side. They had an extremely diverse empire, and at times this even led to divisions. They were, as I mentioned already, they divided up the Mongols divided their massive empire into khanates. So they had several different regional authorities in that way. And one of the things that they were most known for is their religious toleration. So it was quite interesting that in addition to their brutal tactics of war, yet relatively effective management of the people that they have conquered by incorporating them into the empire, giving them a place in the empire, and allowing them this practice of religious toleration. Another just example, you can see that one of the most important things that this led to, this massive Mongol empire, is the diffusion of trade all across the central and west and east part here of Asia. So it is through the Mongols that we see an unbelievably massive amount of cultural diffusion and of trade. Of course, that goes from the Silk Road, but even with the Mongols, this went beyond and extended into new regions and new places. As you can see here, I put that on the left-hand side. This expansive trade networks, this leads to all sorts of international contact and trade. Now we have to be careful here because we have the connotation that trade is always positive. What we will soon see is that this interaction between different groups of people ultimately will lead to some problems, including the diffusion of the bubonic plague, something we will return to. The Mongols were also extensive supporters of art in the merchants, so they very much protected these trade routes, very much ensured that the cultures were shared amongst all the groups of the Mongol Empire. They had a unified Mongol writing system that would facilitate these trades. So we see with a large empire coming some of the benefits of such. So let's bring this a little more specifically. We've been studying China. So the Mongols conquered China. They take over the Song dynasty, and they enact some very interesting policies within China itself. The man who did so, who successfully conquered China, was a descendant of Genghis Khan. His name was Kublai or Kublai Khan, usually known as Kublai Khan. And he successfully invaded China, and he established what's known as the Yuan dynasty, which lasted until 1368. So that means from the Qin all the way, so the Qin starts in 200 years before the year zero, all the way through the 1200s, so 1400 years, China has been ruled on it by themselves. China has created their own dynasties and self-rule. Well, with the Mongols, with the conquering of the Mongols, we now see that China is ruled by a foreign power, and that remains the case for yet almost another 1,000 years. So for almost 1,000 years, the Mongols are ruling China, and the Chinese do not have control over their own empire. We see that there's a shift immediately away from Confucianism. We see a shift away from Buddhism, even though there is tolerance for these faiths. We still see that in the government, for example, the Confucius practice of the civil service exam is no longer used because, of course, the Mongols are instituting their own forms of obedience and of governance. They also created a social system that discriminated against the Chinese. So you can see on the right-hand side that you might want to include this on the right-hand side of your own notes. The Mongols were at the top of the social pyramid. The non-Han population. Han is not just the name of the dynasty, but also the ethnicity of the people of China in that particular region. So the non-Han population, particularly those who are Islamic, something we'll come back to when we study the rise of the rise of the Middle East, we'll see here that the non-Han or Islamic population is next on the social hierarchy, followed by the Northern Chinese, followed by then the people who are native Chinese. The Northern Chinese were in greater proximity to the Mongol Empire themselves and the Mongols, so many of their cultural traditions were more closely aligned to those of the Mongols. So that's it for our introduction to who these Mongols were. Some very conflicting ideas, incredibly powerful and brutal leaders, yet also in many ways quite effective. We'll pause there, go ahead and complete those assessment questions or the analysis questions on Canvas. Thanks.